In The Witcher 3, Geralt is a professional monster hunter for hire, which often extends to hunting other humans as well. Well, in this playthrough he is taking a major career shift and following the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi, becoming a pacifist. So let's ask the question, can you beat The Witcher 3 as a pacifist? Well, to give you the short answer, no. Obviously you can't beat a game predominantly featuring tabletop card games without committing a small bit of murder on the side, but what is the minimum amount of kills required to beat this game? Before we begin, it is probably best to explain what I am counting as a kill, and I decided to keep it simple. If I am in control of a character and have to kill anything with a health bar, that is a kill. Any kills by NPCs will not add to the count. The only exception being that I am not allowed to use the Axii perk to cause enemies to turn on each other faster than a family game of Monopoly. As a side note, we are also playing on deathmatch difficulty. With that out of the way, let us begin a playthrough that, while seemingly innocent on the surface, would end up being a punishment so severe it was even outlawed in North Korea. The beginning of our guided meditation started in White Orchard. The very first quest objective was, of course, kill the ghouls. Quite a predicament considering the self-imposed rules of this challenge strictly forbidding us from doing so. Fortunately, I paid attention in biology class and wasted no time putting the flight part of fight and flight to good use. Running from the ghouls down the road was enough to let Vesemir's early onset dementia kick in to forget the monsters exist and join us in a stroll down to the inn. The village residents really didn't like the idea of pacifism, and were very quick at attempting to violently place their fists in my face repeatedly. Again though, running was an option, and I made my way to the Nilfgaard checkpoint, sniffing some anime convention fumes on the way to make the encounter seem more pleasant in comparison. The captain gave us a trade offer, killing the griffin terrorising the area in exchange for information about Yennefer. We of course accepted, but that left us with the problem of having to kill a griffin. Deciding that going against my pacifist beliefs was too much, I decided to immediately jump to my death. Reloading, I went on my way to gather some bait for the griffin, giving me time to think about how we were going to deal with this situation. With our bait prepared, we spoke to Vesemir, who through his newly found gambling addiction provided us with a crossbow, trying to tempt us into becoming a bloodthirsty monster. It was easy to avoid this temptation though. All we had to do was sit and watch Vesemir as he provided the griffin with more stab wounds than a night out in London. While this did take roughly 15 minutes to complete, it would be considered a world record pace speedrun relative to what was to come later. With that in mind, I returned the griffin's head to the captain and could prepare to finally leave this place so that the real challenge could begin. Unfortunately, the locals from earlier weren't too pleased that I fled the fight with them, and they brought back up, trapping me in a room with them. Luckily though, Vesemir had my back, and was able to slaughter the bandits for me, meaning we could leave White Orchard with a total of 0 kills. After a brief interaction with Ciri's father, who refused to make child support payments, we moved on to the open world of Velen. In celebration of our newfound freedom, we went to the local pub like a true Brit to celebrate with alcohol. With a bit of liquid courage in our system, we went on to look for Hendrik, which really put a damper on our celebrations moments prior. Now, despite knowing where Hendrik is, and that we are able to look at his corpse, it didn't matter as we could only progress after talking to the survivor in the village, which of course the wild dogs mistook for an unintended child and tried to attack him. I tried luring the dogs away and talking to the survivor, but that would have been too easy, so the game didn't allow it. With seemingly no other options, and my head hanging in shame thinking that our kill counter was going to increase this early into the run, I took a trip to Novigrad to visit a brothel in hopes I would be able to think of a solution. Then it hit me. Whores. No, not that kind. Horse. Let me explain. But first, let's go back to those dogs. In case you didn't know, it turns out Roach is actually capable of dealing damage, thanks to the kick she learned by taking one Muay Thai class. While it was a saving grace gifted to us directly from God at this point in the run, the damage was palpable at best, but as Bruce Lee said, I fear not the horse who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the horse who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. Having witnessed what happens to those that oppose us, the survivor remained pretty terrified. But by using some questionable BetterHelp therapy, we made him tell us what happened, and I returned the favour by doing absolutely fuck all to help him, and probably made things worse. We could now loot Hendrik's body for the key to his basement where he kept a diary of the woman he used to stalk. Using the information from the diary, we went to go speak to the Baron at Crow's Perch. Thanks to my diplomatic drinking session earlier, the guards let me in without trouble. Continuing on our binge drinking, we had a couple of shots with the Baron, while he told us what happened to Ciri. This is unfortunately where we ran into some issues. Almost immediately into the flashback, we had to kill this group of wolves. I tried a few different ideas here to skip past this, but thanks to the power of invisible walls, this was no use, and I had to regrettably add 3 to Ciri's kill count, and it was only going to get worse from here. Upon killing the wolves, Gretka came down from the tree, and we were able to progress further into the flashback, but almost immediately we ran into yet another pack of wolves that needed to die. I tried running ahead to the cave which has the King of Wolves inside, but for some reason he doesn't spawn unless you follow each step of the quest. You can even run past the wolves you have to protect Gretka from, but again this leads nowhere. It did provide a brief moment of excitement though when I managed to trigger the cutscene for brewing the blade oil without killing the wolves, but sadly we were cockblocked by the game just putting me back to where I was. So let's add 5 more wolves to the counter, and an extra one for the King of Wolves that we can't skip. The flashback ended and I went on to raid the Baron's bedroom. Like any true crime documentary, the Baron and his wife got into a fight, and the wife and kid went missing. It was our job to find them. Since the prime suspect was being as cooperative as a sovereign citizen, I was left with no other choice than to interview some other witnesses. Unfortunately for me, the Baron's men were engaging in some witness intimidation, and because I have absolutely zero foresight, didn't put any points into delusion yet. Upon realising my monumental fuck-up, I reloaded my previous save and went to get some skill points from the places of power scattered across the region. With our manipulation stat maxed out, I returned to the Peller's hut and gaslit the men into abandoning their mission. Despite saving the Peller from inevitably possessing less limbs than the average person, he still refused to help us unless I found his girlfriend. There are of course packs of wolves in the area, but these can easily be avoided by just walking around the edge. This wasn't the main issue though. The goat having the self-preservation instincts of a 1945 Japanese pilot proved to be a big problem, as it hurled itself directly into a den of a bear. The bad news is, in order to move forward, the bear had to die. The good news is, the goat is unable to die. We had Roach with us, so she was our source of damage. Even if she did try to flee every few seconds, making this fight unbearably rage-inducing. I did somewhat find a way to control this though. Doing more mounting and dismounting than Bonnie Blue in a hotel bedroom caused Roach to flee less and do more kicks. With the bear defeated, I was able to return the goat to the Peller, where he gave us testimony of what the Baron did to his wife. With the evidence being overwhelmingly beyond a reasonable doubt at this point, we went on to confront the Father of the Year. Upon arriving back at Crow's Perch, we caught the Baron in the act of trying to destroy the evidence. I wasn't going to let this slide, but because I can't fight back, I had to come up with a different strategy. Conveniently, the area has a nice sizable patch of flames on the floor, which was enough to spontaneously combust the man whose blood was mostly alcohol. Since setting a man on fire was a bit extreme, we made sure to extinguish him using a nearby water trowel, because there is no better way of dealing with a man on fire than drowning him. With the Baron interrogated, I finally got him to confess to what happened, and it was time to deal with the botchling in his house. Going at night, we approached where he buried the child, but he was nowhere to be seen. From the shadows, the 1991 American metal band approached us. Initially, I pulled out my coat hanger and got ready to remove the fetus, but the nimble bastard managed to dodge our strike and became enraged at our violent outburst. This wasn't an issue though, as we had Roach at our side ready to be our bodyguard. Normally, you can't summon Roach here, but me being the strategic genius that I am, summoned the horse before the cutscene, so she was here to stay. Now we weren't in the clear just yet though, as getting the botchling low causes it to start healing and for wraiths to spawn. It goes without saying that our strategy wasn't exactly feasible for clearing this fight, so I was left with no other option but to reload the save and try the alternative route, killing wraiths and escorting the Baron. This was a nightmare, and when I say nightmare, I mean Freddy Krueger would even think this is a bit far. I'm not exaggerating when I say this section alone took 8 hours to complete. I spent 8 hours of my life watching a horse kick wraiths in a video game. So, while I'm questioning my life choices that led up to me being stuck in this situation, did you know that 37% of you aren't subscribed? It would be cool if you did though. Despite considering throwing my PC out of my window and getting checked into a psych ward at this moment, I pushed on and managed to get the Baron to bury his crotch gobbling. If only he invested in some Durex, he wouldn't be in this situation to begin with. With our suffering finally being put on hold temporarily, I fell to my knees in celebration, raising the fetus back from the dead one last time to aid me with my stalking endeavours. Following the Lubbokin proved to be no challenge at all. The only potential issue would have been having to inspect this dead horse that was surrounded by rot fiends. Fortunately, with some careful and slow movement, I was able to avoid fighting them and examine the horse before being attacked. Continuing down the path, we wound up at a hut in the middle of nowhere. Inside, the occupants politely informed me of where the Baron's wife and daughter ended up. The daughter wouldn't have been a problem if it wasn't for the newly implemented COVID guidelines in Oxenfurt putting the city into lockdown. But given that these guidelines weren't enforced at all, I just swam across the river into the city instead. Once inside the walls of Oxenfurt, I wasted no time in wasting time by kicking a table around like a football for a few minutes before getting back on track to do what I came here for. Of course, the daughter didn't particularly fancy the idea of becoming the Baron's next punching bag, so declined the offer of returning home. All that remained was finding his wife, which would involve a slight detour to visit Kira Metz. On the way though, something unusual happened. I summoned Roach, and for some reason she was just chilling inside some random house. While this was just a goofy thing that happened in the moment, it would plant a seed that would come to sprout later on in this playthrough. Moving on, I went on to spectate Kira's horrible customer service skills in action as she insulted the crowd of customers. But honestly, who can blame her? People are the worst. After a brief chit-chat with the witch, we made our way to a cave Siri was supposed to go to, but went missing instead. This cave had foliage around the entrance and seemed to be quite spacious inside with multiple holes, traits that are also shared with your mother. Upon going deeper into the cave, we found other men had already been here, another shared trait. We pressed forwards, which was easy for the most part. The drowners in the area can be skipped, and the golem blocking the path can be killed by Kira. With the sentient rock eroded, we could move on to my worst nightmare, dealing with these portals. The hounds these spawn can be skipped simply by using Yerden, but like always, I continually managed to blow my load too early, messing up the timing. After more attempts than I'm willing to admit, I managed to do it just right. All that remained was Nithral. Since I cannot be bothered with dealing with this bullshit, I just slapped this wall with some art to reveal my goon cave and patiently watched his health bar be reduced to nothing by Kira. She wasn't impressed by our performance and pulled me to the side afterwards to chew me out, but instead revealed information about the witches in the swamp. As a token of our gratitude, I helped her with what she needed in Fyke Isle. In reality, it was actually because I would need her later on in Kaer Morhen. Luckily for me, there are no enemies in this side quest. Well, there is this water hag guarding the entrance to the tower, but by keeping our distance it doesn't attack us. Inside the tower we climbed up and did some ghost busting, and afterwards outside the tower we did some regular busting, because after all, busting makes you feel good. With Kira recruited using the payment of sperm donations, I could move on to searching for more women, in this case the crones of Crookback Bog. Our attempts to establish communication with the elderly resident in the bog was met only with demands to get off of her lawn. Johnny would be our only hope. Getting to him wasn't that difficult. You do have to interact with his footprints before being able to interact with his cave, and those footprints just so happen to be guarded by a water hag and some drowners. Just like previously, we were able to run in and inspect the trail before urgently fleeing the scene. Now, able to interact with the cave, we pulled Johnny out of his hole, but the little shit was thoroughly exercising his right to remain silent. This is where some minor inconveniences arise. For starters, Johnny would become a giant pussy at the mere sight of a drowner, so avoiding combat wasn't an option. Even if I did skip ahead and got the bottle containing his voice in advance by impersonating Magnus Mitbo and effortlessly climbing up the side of the cliff, it didn't matter. Normally, there are harpies and a wyvern waiting at the top to give you a firm beating, but if you climb up the unintended way, you can simply steal from the nest without issue. Returning to Johnny, I now had to deal with the drowners. With us being outside, summoning Roach was an easy solution, and this time around she mistakenly thought she was at a Travis Scott concert, and started trampling the crowd, taking even more of a strain on my sanity as this turned out to be even more inconsistent than my upload schedule. We took Johnny to emotionally manipulate the boomer into helping us, and to my delight she obliged. With working from home encouraged, the ladies of the wood were not in the office at the time and opted to work remotely. This meeting could have been an email though, as they just handed me a knife and told me to get to work. We have a couple of choices here, either kill the tree or free it. Due to my insistence being a lazy bugger, I tried to use Roach to kill the tree, but it is immune to horse-inflicted trauma, so saving the tree it is. To perform the ritual to save the tree, I had to collect some bones. These of course were guarded by monsters that can just be avoided by following the court-mandated restraining order and keeping our distance. And the final ingredient required cheating on Roach with a big black horse. Taking this horse underground, we performed the ritual and saved the tree. The alderman wasn't a fan of the use of animals for rituals and gave me an earful for my actions. We completed our task though, so we could finally speak directly to the crones. Upon seeing them though, I really wished they continued working from home. Now that my mouth was sufficiently filled with my own vomit, they told us about what they wanted to do to Ciri. The fleeing the bog flashback wasn't a problem, since all the enemies that spawned can be ignored while you run it down mid. All that remained of Velen for the time being was reporting our findings to the Baron and having yet another Ciri flashback. This one had a mandatory fight though, from a basilisk that came to ruin our day, which could have posed a problem, but the Baron was kind enough to take a break from massaging his wife's face with his fists to put those skills to use on the monster. With our leads all dried up in Velen, it was time to move on to Novigrad, and this is where things got lit. The locals were on a crusade against witches, as evident from the whole stake burning introduction. This was trouble, as we had to meet up with our witch friend Triss. Some opportunistic bandits were taking advantage of the chaos, and were raiding her house in an effort to sniff her panties or something. Before things escalated and panties were stolen, Menga rocked up and arrested the guys for being absolute degenerates. During the conversation, there are mentions of a man by the name of the King of Beggars. Apparently, he might know something about our friend. As such, I did what any morally bankrupt person would do: stalk somebody relentlessly and then show up at their house unannounced. Surprisingly, I was invited in with open arms to Diagon Alley, where witchcraft and wizardry thrived. As expected, Triss was inside, and this was a relief since she would prove extremely useful. We started to follow our new companion, but this ended up with us having to hide in a sketchy basement to escape the tyrannical police. This basement was blocked by a drowner, which we normally have to kill. This wouldn't be an issue for this playthrough though, since we have Triss by our side able to deal with it. But my patience was growing thin, and waiting around all the time ends up being quite boring, so instead I chose to do some save and load cheese to interact with the hidden door switch before the game could decide I was in combat. Our job wasn't done yet though, as we had to collect Triss's package from the river and help her out with a rat infestation. With the task at hand completed, we flirted a little bit about our past, but we were rudely interrupted by a group of witch hunters that insisted on reducing the number of limbs attached to my body. Since I unsurprisingly value the use of my arms and legs, I decided to hide in a corner watching Triss finish off the men like some kind of peeping Tom. They went down without much of a fight, and the employer settled out of court because it turns out getting guys with swords to attack your employees is a pretty big health and safety violation. If he thought he could scam us, he can keep dreaming. So anyway, I started dreaming about Dandelion. These visions revealed he recently was around Ciri, and this meant our next step was to find him. What should have been a cold case was warmed up by the fact that the dreamer that put us to sleep knew about Dandelion recently inheriting a brothel. Just hearing the word brothel, I ran as fast as I could to get there, but we weren't greeted with beautiful women. We were instead met with some dirty homeless men squatting. At least that is what they appeared to be at first glance. But upon closer inspection, it was just a hen party from Birmingham. Our big buff muscle daddy friend Zoltan was on the scene and ready to kick some ass though. The hobos left behind were determined to fight, so I went upstairs to hide in my room while my parents fought in the room below. After Zoltan kicked out the intruders, we got to chatting about Dandelion. He didn't know where he could be, but he did provide us with his latest Tinder matches, which was a good place to start. First on the list was Vespula, but this wasp wasn't the one doing the swarming. In fact, she was being swarmed by a group of men. Since we need to talk to her to continue, and Junior's goons were in the way, I had two options: fight them, not ideal for this challenge, or pay 200 crowns. I of course chose to pay the 200 crowns. And as it happens, Dandelion ended up on her bad side, so I moved on down the list. The next couple of people didn't have any issues, just talking to people. That was until we got to the last person, Rosa. To get her to talk, we tricked her into thinking I was her teacher, but this quickly backfired when she pulled out a sword and challenged me to a duel. Now I know I can't kill her here, so technically it would be okay for me to win the fight, but I felt like it would go against the spirit of the challenge. So in my never-ending quest to be dominated by the entire female population of The Witcher 3, I let her slap me around as much as she wanted. This puts my score against Rosa to a nice 2-3, meaning I now had a worse track record with Rosa than America has with planes. I wasn't going to let this keep me down though. I had places to be and Zoltan was waiting for me. Our efforts were apparently all in vain, as this dwarf was hiding something from me, and I don't mean a few extra inches. He neglected to tell us about another woman on the list, which was the only one that mattered. To calm down, we went to the Kingfisher Inn to listen to some great tunes, not a phone in sight, just people living in the moment. This wasn't without controversy though, as a random person in the crowd decided to accuse me of murder, which is certainly an interesting claim given that I am a pacifist, and as a result I followed the way of Billy Mitchell and sued her for defamation. To avoid conflict, the bard told me to come. Before I could get the wrong idea, she dragged me and Zoltan off to a room where we had a nice conversation about Dandelion. We learned that he had apparently taken on the nuisance streamer lifestyle and pissed off the entire city of Novigrad, subsequently leading to his arrest. Not to worry though, we had a plan. We had to find Junior. The only issue was he was in hiding, so we took a different approach, getting all soaped up with the boys. This didn't go to plan though, as I dropped the soap and Junior's men broke in at a chance of getting some Witcher booty. Since the assassins can't get into the room, I decided to just sit in a corner and stare at naked Geralt until Dijkstra and the lads did the work for me. Cleaver was quite frankly pissed about the whole situation. He wanted revenge, and I can't really blame him. Our goals were somewhat aligned here, since we both wanted to find him, we could work together. Before I could leave though, Dijkstra took me to the side to have a word. Somebody had forced entry into his back passage and required our help. Upon investigating the area, we found remains of an explosive, but we still needed more evidence, so I followed the stream running past the monsters to see what I could find. There was something on the ground, but I needed to be out of combat to interact with it, and it was just my luck that there were two drowners standing right there. Not to worry though, I had a plan. I noticed a gate on the other side of the room, and got to work. I travelled back through the way I came and went to the surface. From here, I went to roughly where the gate was on the map, to try and find a route from the surface. I could see the cylinder through the door, all that remained was to get it. This proved to be easy since the drowners were guarding the other door, letting me swoop in from behind and get what I needed without incident. We returned these pieces of the bomb to Dijkstra, where we learned who was responsible. It was a guy by the name of Henkel, and his house wasn't too far from here, so off I went to kick his door down and raid his home. All the clues pointed to Dandelion being the thief. Not ideal, since we kind of needed him alive and our investigation was showing he racked up more charges than a politician. Afterwards, Dijkstra pressured us for information we learned, but in order to protect my friend, I had to lie while having the subtlety of a brick, meaning he saw right through me. No matter though, we knew that Menga had something to do with Dandelion's disappearance, so we had to devise a plan. Not one to waste an opportunity, Triss quickly decided to take public displays of affection a bit too far by suggesting BDSM and handing me a pair of handcuffs. As punishment for this unbelievably deviant behaviour, I had no other option but to hand her in to the local authorities. This provided me with an audience with the man himself, Menga. We had a nice little chat, while, in what is widely regarded as a dick move, Triss got the BDSM experience that she did not desire in the next room over. The screams came to a stop after some time, causing Menga to go and investigate. Unfortunately for him, this was England and knife crime was on the rise, and by that I mean a knife was rising towards his chin. This was not great news, since only moments ago he revealed that only he had the power to free our friend. Also, just to be clear, letting Triss get tortured wasn't just for sadistic reasons, it also lets us skip fighting the entire Witcher outpost and we could just escape out of the side door. She was a bit upset about what had just transpired and decided to renovate the outpost to match the colour of her hair. With our new knowledge of Dandelion's whereabouts, I Kool-Aid manned my way through a wall, which while cool also brought the attention of Dijkstra. He wanted his money and I didn't have it, which for some reason ended up with him paying me. making him quite literally the worst loan shark to ever exist. I returned to Priscilla to let her know that Dandelion was a bit tied up at the moment in the literal sense, but she didn't like our news. But while she devised a plan, I went back to my original plan, finding Junior. Thankfully, Cleaver gave us the option to speak to him before initiating the raids on Junior's place, meaning that after a brief conversation, he agreed to help us. His men were to wait outside of each zone for our signal to attack, and initially, I had hopes and dreams, but they were swiftly shattered when we sieged the casino. They took on the guards outside with no issue. Once inside is where the problems began. The dwarves were the equivalent of a coughing baby versus a hydrogen bomb. They were killed immediately. This was extremely bad news for me. The thugs were inside and the only way to continue was by killing them. And it just so happens that Junior's casino is not a pet-friendly establishment, so using Roach was off of the table. Or was it? Remember earlier when Roach appeared in a random house? Well, this is where that seed sprouted. I had the idea to try standing in different spots and summon Roach in hopes that she would by some miracle spawn inside of the casino ready to do my bidding. This immediately gave promising results when she spawned inside of a house just down the street, and then much later decided to bait me by appearing right on the wall of the casino on the minimap, but when I turned around, she was just hanging out with the bouncers. These attempts honestly went on for way longer than I should have before giving up, but each attempt it became increasingly more apparent that this was not going to be possible. This is when I decided to take a sledgehammer to a nail approach at coming up with a solution. Under normal circumstances, if you try to move forward on Roach while too close to a wall, she will just shake her head and refuse to go anywhere. The same applies to doors, but if you open the door first before attempting the same thing, it tricks the game into thinking the area is open space, allowing you to walk forward a little bit more. You are still bound to the hitbox limitations of the doorway, but it was progress. While walking was no longer getting closer, simply jumping got us to the halfway mark. All we needed now was just a little extra push to get fully inside. I could sprint here, and Roach was clipping slightly through the floor. It wasn't much, but it was promising. I kept trying without much result, but after dismounting a couple of times, one of the tries Roach moved even more slightly forward, giving me hope for an otherwise disastrous situation. I kept on, and eventually, this happened. Roach was finally inside. I was honestly so excited about this discovery. The buildings in The Witcher 3 were the parts I was fearing most for this challenge, and it felt like I had just discovered something that broke the run wide open. With our horse parked inside, I was able to go back and gather the dwarves to start off the fight. Of course, they still immediately died, but now I had a way to deal damage. I took the joke of a horse walking into a bar literally, when I walked Roach into the bar to be in the best position to kick the henchman. While it wasn't risky since the enemies mostly queued single file ready to fight me, it still took absolutely forever thanks to Roach occasionally deciding they were also doing a pacifist challenge refusing to kick. All this effort, all this struggling, just to find out Junior wasn't even here. And this was the first of 3 locations to check, but it was also the hardest of them, so it was all uphill from here. Next up we went to take on the arena. The doors leading into the underground area were much larger to accommodate for when Lizzo inevitably performs here, making getting Roach inside much easier than into the houses. While we had Roach at our disposal, I did still have to do some tricks here, to not become a human pincushion thanks to the crossbow wielding maniacs. The crossbow isn't their only means of attack. When you invade their personal space, the social awkwardness of the situation disarms them and they just stand there looking at you confused for a moment while they reach for their sword. I repeated this for the next rooms, and after doing whatever the fuck this is, and fully clearing the area, Junior was once again nowhere to be found. We did find out that he was being all buddy-buddy with the Redanians though, betraying the Big Four of Novigrad. This information was quickly passed on to Dijkstra, and in exchange he tipped us off that our old friend Vernon Roach, no relation to the horse, might be of use. When arriving at our good friend's home we were met with the usual amount of hostility. But the situation was quickly resolved when Roach noticed us and let us in just in time to get involved in some personal drama within the group. Putting these domestic incidents aside, we rode off back to Oxenfurt, where he took us to a chess club. I'm not sure what gambit he was going for here, but it turned out it left his king completely exposed. Despite having the king in check, We were unable to deliver the capture since he told us where Junior was living, and that was quite important. After offering a draw, I hauled ass to the location we were given. Outside were two of his goons blocking us from getting in. Not to worry though, Roach was able to take care of them for us while the local guards cheered us on. Looting the body gave us the key to get inside, where I had to execute the same strategy as the casino, brute forcing my way through the door while riding Roach. Once inside the compound, I positioned Roach at the highest point I was able to, and watched as the hordes of Junior's men lined up ready to get kicked in the face. Having cleared out the arena, I had a bit of a problem. There were still men inside of the house, and for some reason, the door just wouldn't let me get Roach through, using the same strategy as before. I assumed the porch had something to do with that. So, is this where we have to get our first kills? Of course not. There is conveniently a back door that doesn't have anything to block my head, so with a bit of a push I was able to get our heroic stallion inside. I positioned Roach in a corner and let them get to work while I sat and watched. We moved up the stairs where we stumbled upon the man we were looking for, Junior. He was found to be a chronic meat beater, so we used questionably ethical means to change his ways, by beating him like meat. After putting the fist in Pacifist, Junior gave us a rundown of the time he met Siri. She had run across the rooftops to break into his building to free Dodo, and as normal with these flashbacks so far, I had no other option but to fight. There was no escape. All the exits were blocked by guards, and unfortunately for Junior and his thugs, pumped up kicks had just come on my playlist. So, like Anakin in a room full of younglings, we pulled out our sword and slashed away, adding another 11 kills to our counter. We had everything we needed to be able to free Dandelion now though. The plan was simple. Talk to Priscilla, and get her to put on a play to catfish Doodoo. She would work on the script while I hired some bodyguards to keep the audience in line, putting another dent in our already limited financial situation. I headed back to the crew and got ready to put on a play. During the performance, I forgot my lines, which is apparently not a valid defense in court against drug charges. In a desperate attempt to bail myself out of this humiliating situation, I spotted Doodoo in the crowd and dragged him up on stage. Back in the dressing room, we discussed our plot to rescue Dandelion from the church. Doodoo would cosplay as the recently dead Menga and order the bard to be relocated ready for execution, and we would lie in wait for them to show up. I tried being a bit cheeky here. Since I know where the witch hunters take Dandelion, my idea was to go to the hut in the middle of nowhere and try to get Roach inside before the witch hunter barricades the door. This, however, was not meant to be. The door was locked with no key, and there was seemingly no way to get the horse inside. I explored the area a bit, but our efforts were futile. So, with our options exhausted, I went back to the Roadrunner crew and dropped a tree on the road. A witch hunter fled the scene with Dandelion over the back of his horse, travelling to the hut we were just trying to breach. The dwarves gave us a key to the back tunnel route, and I came up with a plan. We can't get Roach inside the hut, but we can jump down the shaft into the basement. But we ran into another problem. Horses are incapable of climbing ladders, so I decided that if I can't bring the horse to the witch hunters, I would bring the witch hunter to the horse. But what I didn't account for in my otherwise watertight plan was the witch hunter being able to fly. Bit of a fucking hypocrite if you ask me. A fireball is off limits, but turning into a bird is fine? I have no idea why, but it was nearly impossible to make them fall into the hole. That was until this happened. He finally fell. Or so I thought. I went back down into the basement to see him, and he was nowhere to be found. Maybe he reset to be back upstairs. Nope, not that either. He was just gone. Funnily enough, even though the witch hunter is no longer guarding our friend, I wasn't able to save him until the witch hunter was killed. At first, I thought maybe he was just a filthy combat logger, but upon further review of the footage, it showed he actually threw an ender pearl at the final moment, teleporting him 3,000 meters away, all the way to Crow's Perch. What actually happened here I have no clue, but I didn't really care. This was perfect for us. The target was now outside, and that meant one thing: we could use Roach. I arrived at the quest marker, and he was there. It was beautiful. After dying a couple of times to this guy in increasingly embarrassing ways, I decided to turn the Geneva Convention into a Geneva suggestion as I lured our opponent all the way across the map to Crookback Bog. Why, you might be asking? Well, the swamp contains gas clouds, and the idea of going through the 40-minute slog of horse kicks was not something I was willing to put myself through again. These gas clouds made quick work of the witch hunter. To my relief, they actually did damage to enemies, meaning we could now travel back to the hut and untie Dandelion. We had a brief chat with him about the events that took place with Ciri, leading us to yet again another flashback. Not a good sign, but this time something was different. The two groups of guards can be ignored as the gate gets opened just by being close enough to it. From there, we mounted our horse and rode up to the top of Temple Isle, ignoring everything along the way. To progress, we needed to kill the guards blocking the door, but that wasn't a problem since we had access to a horse that had taken more steroids than the Liver King. With the horde defeated, we pushed through the door, Ciri took a crossbow bolt to the tit, and Dandelion was arrested. After some parting words from the bard informing us of the new IKEA furniture he acquired, this was where our adventures of Novigrad ended, so it was time to move on to Skellige, where I ran into a wealth of problems, and by that, I mean wealth was a problem. Due to the rampant tariffs implemented by the Skellige regime, the cost of travel had skyrocketed. Add on top of that the cost of living crisis, and I couldn't afford the boat ticket to get there. So, to fix my situation of being low on crowns, I took inspiration from OnlyFans. I got naked and sold my clothes for money. Now nude, I was able to pay the fee to take the boat across to Skellige. The captain commented on my hefty sack and we set sail. Our journey was as smooth as a flight with Ryanair, thanks to pirates boarding our ship, but again, luckily we didn't have to kill them, we had the captain and crew to take care of them for us. We washed up on shore and rushed to meet up with Yennefer. She was currently attending a funeral, and always the romantic type, I decided it was a fantastic time to make a move. With all the flirting at this funeral, the corpse wasn't the only thing that was hard. Our sexcapades had to be put on hold for the time being, as we had a wake to attend. Upon arrival, we were challenged to a race, but I had to decline. I didn't want any more distractions from our main goal of finding Ciri. Anyway, after our conversation, I went with Yennefer to snoop around Ermion's workshop in search of a mask. When trying to gain entry, I was drugged by the door handle and started hallucinating pretty badly, seeing things that weren't real, like the moon for example. I started slashing at some stuffed animals, but they were as lifeless as Jake Paul's opponents in boxing, so it doesn't count as a kill. After getting the piss taken out of us by Yennefer for heroically slaying the trial of taxidermy, we moved on and found the mask, which turned out to be very similar to a strip club in Thailand. Once we touched it, we realised it was a trap. A golem came out of nowhere, but this was no match for Yennefer. The room filled with gas, and after pondering whether or not to let the gas consume us or portal out of there, we sensibly went with the latter option. With the valuables now in our possession, we went back to the wake and spoke to the Jarl. He gave us full permission to do whatever the fuck we wanted on the island, which is an incredible amount of trust placed awfully. We were eager to exploit this to the fullest, and despite protest from Ermion, we used the mask, rendering it worthless in his eyes. We raced down into the crater and had to watch Yennefer kill some foglets for me. The mask was used to see visions of the events that took place here, and those visions of course showed that Ciri was the one involved. We traced her steps while donning the mask, watching her as she walked with a tall guy and fought the wild hunt. In the process, we were being attacked by foglets, and while we could use Yennefer here to kill them, this would take forever. So instead, with a bit of annoying movement and using the mask, you can avoid fighting them altogether. At the end of the trail, we found some armour of the wild hunt, confirming our suspicions. The druid was slightly more cooperative now and informed us of an attack on a nearby village by a group matching the description of the hunt. Skipping a few steps about Ciri being at the village led us to a sacred garden. We were looking for a man she had spoken to. Thankfully, we found his footsteps fairly easily, which certainly helped with tracking him down in a time before Apple AirTags existed. Sadly, he was almost decomposed at this point. This wasn't an issue though, because Yennefer had a plan. All we had to do was resurrect him for a bit, leading us to, you guessed it, yet another Ciri flashback, in which I took some shots because God knows I needed it. From here, we entered the difficult part of this section, being raided by the wild hunt after they found out that we had oil. While I say it was difficult, that isn't entirely true. We had our White Knight Skjal willing and able to protect us, even if his methods were a tad bit unorthodox. After about 2 hours of standing in a corner where the wild hunt couldn't reach, I was able to progress and follow our hero down to the beach, where Ciri met up with an elven sage, followed by visions of one ugly bastard with the posture of the average gamer and the face only a mother can love. Returning to the real world, Yennefer finished up by sucking the life out of the entire garden, as well as the conversation. That wasn't of importance right now though. The mutant being was our only lead remaining for Ciri, and it was a good thing I knew where to find him. He was being held hostage at Crow's Perch for the men's entertainment, so I made my way over to steal him. The goal was to take him back to Kaer Morhen and find a way to lift his curse. Upon arriving, I watched Roach trying out the new Chris Haria workout routine, before heading out to help Eskel with some forktail hunting. There isn't much to say here, it was just me watching Eskel fight a forktail and then checking the corpse for an organ donor card before harvesting its spinal fluid. With that chore out of the way, it was time to sit and watch Lambert kill some monsters instead, and of course I can't forget to mention calling him a prick. We crossed the lake on his boat and admired the view from atop the circle of elements to enchant a fancy box. This was all in preparation to remove the curse with the help of Yennefer, but Vesemir had his reservations. Being an anti-vaxxer, he was strictly opposed to our methods, and instead snatched Uma from us to try out his essential oils and shungite crystals. After this naturally failed to do anything, we proceeded with our procedure as originally planned, and just like wearing a turban in an airport, this was going to be a risky manoeuvre. The chances of success were slim, but we pumped some chemicals into him until the following morning when the cure was revealed to be successful. Uma transformed into an elven sage. He was still weak but was able to muster up the strength to tell me where Ciri was waiting. Saving her had to wait though, because I first had to gather some reinforcements for the battle that was about to take place. Zoltan, Triss and Ermione had no issue joining our cause. Roach on the other hand wasn't going to join us without helping him with Vess first, and I needed all the manpower I could get. We got to work dealing with his issues, and initially I was worried. We had to save Vess from some Nilfgaardians she decided to fuck around with, and was currently in the process of finding out. Given that the objective was to save Vess, and the quest gives you a nice little health bar for her, I was expecting this to be impossible, but it turns out that she can't die, so I just ended up sitting there and waiting for Roach and Vess to clear them up. After generously spectating the rescue attempt, they agreed to join us in the fight for Ciri. This is where things started to get interesting. Arriving at the Isle of Mists, I knew one thing was going to be an issue. Roach was not available in this area, so any monsters in the area would have to be dealt with using other means and would have to get creative. For starters, these foglets show up on the path to the hut containing Ciri, but thankfully you can just run and ignore them. Upon reaching the hut, the dwarves inside rudely refused to let us in, unless I retrieved their lost friends for them. The first of the 3 dwarves I chose to deal with was Ivor sat on the top of a cliff. But what's at the bottom of the cliff? 2 water hags blocking our progress. But maybe there is a way to skip fighting them. What if you can somehow climb up the cliff? Well, there is a path leading up behind the rock he's sitting on, the only thing being that it is blocked off, so clearly you aren't supposed to be able to reach him. So naturally I spent the next hour throwing myself off of the cliff, desperately trying to reach the ledge, and I was about to give up, until I managed to make the jump with some extremely dumb save load abuse. The only thing is, it was a shame that all of this effort was for nothing, as you can't interact with him to progress the quest, so that means the only way to move forward would be to kill the water hags. The first thing that came to mind was friendly fire when the hags throw what I assume is mud at me, but while it would be able to kill one of them, the chances of getting in a situation where they both friendly fire to finish each other off at the same time is nearly impossible. While I thought about how I would deal with these hags, I went on to help Gaspard get back to the hut. He was in the lighthouse, and was doing an excellent impression of me by falling asleep all of the time. And if the fact that an escort quest wasn't bad enough, he doesn't move forward if you are in combat, and of course, you are expected to take a path filled with monsters, including a pair of foglets prepared to spawn campers upon leaving the lighthouse. Despite the initial concern I had, it was an easy solution of just baiting the foglets to the other side of the isle, then running back to the dwarf to wake him up, and continue towards the hut, making sure to take a path that avoids any monsters. It was at this moment I had the last-ditch effort of how to deal with the hags. There is a fiend on the other side of the island, and I just hoped that it was somehow capable of dealing damage to other monsters, similar to how projectiles work. While baiting it across, I noticed that when it charged it dealt damage to a foglet, which was fantastic news as it confirmed my plan was going to work. The fiend rocked up on the beach, killed the hags, and the dwarf threw himself to his death. Returning to the hut, the dwarves kindly let us in, even though we only brought back a third of their friends, which was apparently a passing grade. Ciri woke up and we teleported back to Kaer Morhen ready to fight. and that meant we cleared the Isle of Mist with still 0 kills as Geralt. With our forces gathered and ready to fight, we faced against the Wild Hunt. This part is fairly simple, so I'll try to keep it brief. The first phase was taking out some portals. You don't have to kill them, just use Yerden on a portal and run along to the next one. With the borders closed preventing entry from the Wild Hunt, we retreated. Unfortunately, this did not stop them from entering without a visa, and we had to resort to force. Well, I didn't have to. In this series section, Triss can do all the work for me. Next, we had to close the main gate, even with there being several warriors in the way. It didn't matter, as I am pretty sure this is the only object in the game which you are allowed to interact with while in combat. After this, I had to help Triss fight. Of course, I wasn't going to do this and instead opted to watch from behind a wall, cheering her on from the sidelines. Everything was going as smooth as butter, until the next part of Ciri and Eskel. One of the hounds decided to do a Tom Cruise, but instead of being in a closet, no-clipped through the wall to be immune to damage. We reloaded a save and watched Eskel execute the hound for the crime of being certified cringe, and retreated deeper into the walls. The Wild Hunt surrounded us, and the only option was to put on our beret, pull out our white flag and surrender. Vesemir ended up getting choked, the kinky old bastard, and the hunt considerately left us alone to deal with the emotional trauma. I was tired though, so went to bed for the night. I didn't get much sleep though, as Ciri came to tell me she wanted vengeance. Understandable, but certainly not ideal. I'm going to be honest, I spent way too long on this damn mountain. Starting out, you can follow the normal route going diving to get the Defiler's coin to gain passage up the mountain, and that was as easy as it was going to get. With the coin pocketed, we were escorted up the mountain to the IRS. Apparently, we didn't pay our taxes on this income, and they set out to make us pay. Thankfully, Ciri was there to stab him a bunch, but since we aren't in control of Ciri here, this technically doesn't count as a kill for the purposes of the challenge. What does count as a kill though is the 2 crones we mercilessly attack 3 seconds later. Now for Imlerith. Oh boy, this was a journey. I tried everything here to find a way to skip this fight, or to get Roach into the arena, and annoyingly, I can't just summon her at the peak. To save time in this already long video, let me just rattle off the ways I tried to break this area to no success. Jumping up the ledge that leads to the peak while riding Roach didn't work, because unfortunately this was higher than Snoop Dogg so I couldn't reach it. Going to where the crone's cave is as Geralt to see if by some miracle it would lead me to the top. In hindsight, this is actually the same spot you get the coin, and I didn't notice this at the time, but I wonder what happens if you take the path from the water to the crones before fighting Fugus. If anyone wants to try that and let me know what the results are, that would be great. Next, I decided levitating towards the mountain might be a good idea, but this was cut short, and the entire area surrounded with so many invisible walls you would think that Geralt had decided to take up mime. If there was no way to break the game before the fight, maybe I could do something inside the arena, where our options are more limited than the several hundred re-releases of Bethesda games. The only thing of note in the area was this bonfire, but despite being able to climb on top, the only result was a crispy witcher. This meant one thing. Geralt was about to lose his killing virginity as he hit Imlerith with the Gwyneth Paltrow Goop skincare routine. With the general defeated, I returned to Novigrad with Ciri, and regretfully informed the crew about our atrocities we committed. It wasn't worth dwelling on it though, since we had to do the final preparations for our confrontation with Eredin. I decided to start out with the easiest task of the 4 we have to do, helping Ciri with her sightseeing around Novigrad. The first landmark she wished to visit was Junior, probably due to Stockholm Syndrome, but after finding him in the back alley, it was clear that he had gone too hard on the drugs and couldn't string a coherent thought together. Before he managed to gather his bearings, we raced away to meet the circus. We weren't interested in watching, but they did ask us to steal a horse. This wasn't an issue. While cold-blooded murder is off the table, horse theft was completely okay by my warped moral compass. Late at night, I stealthily made my way into the barn, and it was unsurprisingly being watched over by a guard, and while you're in combat, you aren't able to loot or interact with doors, which is exactly what I needed to do here. But this wouldn't be a problem, thanks to most enemies in this game having the object permanence skills of a toddler. Simply dragging them to one end of the barn and running back to the keys and door, and waiting, was enough to no longer be considered in combat, letting me loot and continue without attacking the guard. With the horse now ours, I moved on to helping Avallac'h. We had to jump through a few hoops to get to where we needed to go, and in this case the hoops were not a metaphor, and we indeed had to jump through some hoop-shaped portals to get to our destination. The first of the zones was not a problem, I managed to accidentally jump up the ruined portal out of reach before the crabs spawned, which was perfect for me as I needed to wait for Avalak to do some killing for me. I waited up here for a while before jumping through the portal that eventually appeared. This ended up putting me in the most toxic place I've ever seen. It was dangerous to even breathe. I believe this place was called Twit R. This was before being dropped underwater and then running naked through a frozen tundra. All of this effort just to speak to a guy about his car's extended warranty, going to show just how far scammers are willing to go for that extra cash. And with that out of the way, it was now time for the hard ones, that I don't even know if they are possible. Helping Triss catch Philippa seemed to be the obvious next choice. After all, there are only 6 enemies involved, so surely it isn't too hard. And I was right, it wasn't. By dismounting Roach next to the entrance to the bathhouse before triggering the cutscene, she ends up being inside the bathhouse once the cutscene ends and the door is locked. And while the guards on the ground floor can easily be dealt with by Triss, it is actually much easier by putting the horse-shaped object in, that's right, the square hole. 2 henchmen awaited us at the bottom blocking the door we needed to get through, so I just let Roach bully them for a little while so I could proceed. And eventually, we reached Philippa, where I made a pretty big mistake here actually, by taking Roach inside the arena with the fire golem that she spawns. Not only was it nearly impossible to get the horse close enough for long enough to hit the golem, it actually made it harder to dodge, at least on controller. The button to roll and to mount are the same thing, so this led to plenty of times I tried to dodge and just started mounting Roach instead. And besides all that, Philippa kindly bombarded us with arcane missiles the entire time, and these dealt a good chunk of damage to the elemental. With Philippa captured, it meant that only one part of final preparations remained, and I was saving the hardest for last. Starting out, we followed the questline normally, speaking to Yennefer while she was watching the Just Chatting section on Twitch. Turns out, this was the perfect place to lure a dirty, unkempt man for questioning. He tried to run away, but given the lack of exercise we caught up to him instantly, and so the interrogation could commence. We needed to find out how to get into the prison he escaped from, and despite initial sarcasm, he gave us a rundown of the prison's workings. Parting way with Yennefer temporarily, I went to speak to Zoltan. This was crucial to the plan as the alcohol he supplies the guards reduces the amount of enemies we have to fight in the upcoming section. With all the surface level preparation done, this is where things get weird. The way Yennefer wanted to get into the prison was by diving into the well and going through the sewers, and this presented a few problems for us. Firstly, I would have to kill these drowners to get a lever, and this grave hag blocked us from interacting with the door to get from the ruins to the sewers leading to the prison. Additionally, there are ghouls blocking us from jumping up the ledge to reach the prison entrance, and even if we managed to get past all of this without killing anything, we would still have to get through the guards in the prison, where I'm not able to summon Roach. So, it seemed the only feasible way of defeating this obstacle was by doing the area in reverse. And as somewhat of a tease, there is a hole in the wall which cannot be grabbed and is just out of reach to be able to jump onto. I tried a few times, but no matter the amount of Viagra Geralt was on, he couldn't get up. I wasn't quick to quit though. I did survey the area, and honestly it was not looking good. The prison wall seemed way too high to be exploitable, and it looked like yet another dead end. That was until I noticed there was a tall building next to the prison walls, and better yet, there was even a canopy giving us a nice ledge to climb up. From there, we jumped up the side of the roof, hit a parkour roll, and landed on the roof on the inside of the prison wall. Once inside, I summoned Roach and rode my way up to the warden's office, where it was immediately apparent that the game did not know what to do about me being here this early. The warden was friendly and did not attack us. All of the guards throughout the prison equally didn't give a shit about a clear intruder walking around, and Margarita, the witch we came to rescue, was uninterested in our presence. This meant one thing and one thing only: we had to go through the intended path, but that didn't mean we couldn't prepare first. We had access to Roach at the prison yard, so it was just a case of shimmying her fat ass into the building, down the stairs, and through the door to the lower prison. Now I went back to Yennefer and jumped down the well hoping to encounter the girl from the ring. Sadly, that didn't happen, so I was forced to continue with this cursed playthrough. The grave hag was straightforward to deal with, just had to bait it away to the other side of the ruins and run back quick enough for combat to drop and interact with the door lever. This gave us barely enough time to manage to get through the door. For the next monsters I had a trick up my sleeve, doing the exact same thing again, guiding them through the sewer and running back to the prison ledge. I was able to drop combat and jump up to the prison cells. From here, Roach could take over and kick some witch hunters around for a while, and I could take a well-earned break. We cleared room by room and eventually made my way back up to the top, where the warden was no longer nonchalant about me being there. We got the keys from him and went on to free the witch, and with that we finally completed final preparations. We arrived at the boat ready to set sail for Skellige, and almost ready to face the Wild Hunt once and for all. The first point of call was getting involved in diplomatic relations between Nilfgaard and Skellige. Things rapidly turned into a bloodbath, but I took a page out of Switzerland's book and opted to remain neutral. During the skirmish, Ermin displayed some incredible moves with his staff, handling the weapon with the skill and ferocity of a Filipino mother wielding a flip-flop. After letting him simmer down for a bit, we had a little chat about where the Sunstone could be held that would summon the Wild Hunt. A local bard was said to know about its location, and thankfully, this bard wasn't on the verge of being executed, just looking out across the ocean looking for a white whale. Unfortunately, this wasn't very fruitful as we were on Skellige and not an American beach. With a bit of careful social engineering, I was able to convince him to spill the location of the Sunstone and return to speak to Yennefer about our findings. She didn't seem to care though, and was more interested in breaking into Avallac's Batcave. Yennefer was to open the door while we waited, letting Ciri defeat the golem, but with how long this took, I really wish I invited the lockpicking lawyer instead. Prior to entering, I decided to take a potion of cat, which had no effect other than making me push a bottle off a table and trashing the place. With the area vandalised more than a public bathroom, we had one last thing before the end of the game, collecting the Sunstone with Philippa. Getting on a small boat and riding around the Isle, we approached the Elven ruins ready to do some pillaging as if we were the British Museum. The starting cave leading to the ruins was guarded by a siren and a whole bunch of drowners, but I had Philippa to help me out. What could possibly go wrong? Well, the siren flies, so that was a pretty big problem to deal with. If only there was an item that existed in the game that would deal with flying enemies without dealing damage. Oh wait, there is. The Hornwall Horn. This bad boy, when blown on, brings flying monsters to their knees, stunning them temporarily. Returning to the cave, we blew on the horn constantly to stunlock the siren while Philippa slowly killed off all the drowners. Once the last of the drowners died, I had hoped that the all-powerful sorceress would be capable of killing the siren, but that was not the case. Instead, she just stood there with her resting bitch face watching me struggle, resulting in me once again having to rely on my horse. It actually turned out to be extremely hard to deal damage. Since I can't use the horn while riding, I had to dismount, use the horn, mount up, move Roach to the now grounded siren, dismount, and hope it kicked it before the siren could get up. Moving on through the cave, we encountered a golem guarding the area. Philippa this time decided to do something and slapped the golem around for us. We eventually reached the Sunstone, but to collect it we had to activate some mirrors. The enemies guarding these can be skipped by jumping up the front rather than the path around the back. We were almost ready to face the Wild Hunt. I just had one last thing to do. Before the fight, I decided to plan ahead. I travelled to the island where the final battle takes place and simply summoned Roach, the hope being that she would remain there when the fight breaks out. So I went back to Avallac, checked if the horse was still in place, she was, and started the cutscene for the final battle. And as you might imagine, this didn't work at all, and we had no other choice than to kill Caranthea. Ciri fought the general while I remained frozen in ice. Unfortunately for the Wild Hunt, Geralt had become practitioner of the Wim Hof method, granting me immunity to the frost. Once unfrozen, we delivered an unrelenting beatdown on Caranthea, eventually killing the general, and picking up our second kill of the playthrough. After the encounter, I decided to take a cold plunge so intense that if a morning routine influencer saw it, they would immediately cream their pants. Now revitalised, I charged down the path to reach Eredin. He was currently being informed that a Witcher has hit the second general, and unfortunately for him, he was next. Again, with no way to avoid this, we slashed him up a bunch until he couldn't take it anymore. With our triple homicide now reaching its conclusion, we used the 3-kill streak to call in a UAV and track down the traitorous bastard Avallac. Climbing up the mountain with Yennefer, we were able to skip fighting any of the monsters filling the path by just running past them and triggering the ending cutscene. Avallac informed us of the plan, Ciri went off to face the White Frost, and with that, we could put an end to this insanity-inducing challenge. With that all out of the way, let's take a look at the kill count. Geralt came in with a surprisingly low 3 kills, poetically all being members of the Wild Hunt. Ciri came in with a much higher count of 20, but both paled in comparison to the absolute warlord that was Roach, coming in at a staggering 70 kills. Thanks for watching this unnecessarily long yap fest. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to do the YouTube things, like, dislike, comment, subscribe. Let me know if you have a challenge you want to see me tackle next. Take care, and see you next time.